We must talk about the story dominating the front pages here this morning, the report into the terrible child grooming gangs that was published yesterday, which revealed public bodies covered up evidence. So, conspiracy of silence over race doomed thousands of girls to abuse. That's the Mail. The Mirror, grooming gang scandal, never again. Always, when people say never again, you always think, well, yeah, I'm not sure. You worry that we're not even, we haven't really found out everything about it yet. Grooming gangs report betrayed by the state, that's for sure. The Times has ethnicity brushed aside. This is all about the fact that no one actually grasped the nettle and said these gangs are mainly Pakistani. And then we've now got this, I was going to say inflammatory headline, if it's true, it's true. Asylum seekers are behind the new grooming gang cases. Samuel, what do you think of this? At last, they're having an inquiry.
Yes, to be honest, it's quite shocking because, I'm like many people who feel like these kind of inquiries are not always productive because they can be very expensive. It's lawyers that usually make most of the money and are the most successful.
7 years.
The recommendations very often are not enacted and the victims don't always get justice. But on balance, because of the sheer volume of cases, because of how horrific a lot of these cases are, and because of the questions that haven't been answered, the logical choice was always, on this exceptional circumstance, to have an independent inquiry. Now, that was a conclusion that anyone who was logical could have arrived at months ago, and instead we've had this rapid review that basically tells us what we already knew. And so I don't know if
let's just see what we already knew. So just come over here and have a look at it's the scale of it that's so important. Our brains almost can't contain. If I show you some cities and some offenders, starting with Huddersfield, look at the sheer number of people. Newcastle, again, and the sort of racial connection between them. Bradford again, second load of Bradford. Then we've got Oldham here, another grooming gang. And then these people convicted in Dundee. So all over the country. The key one, though, was Rotherham. That was what broke the story open. A particular reporter as well, who was on it, this idea that these are gangs of a particular ethnicity, mainly Pakistani, who are using and abusing mainly white girls as young as 11, raped, trafficked, abducted, beaten up. Rotherham started 80s, went on till the 2010s. These are the three main offenders, although there were many others. This is one of the victims, Sammy Woodhouse. She became pregnant after being raped by Arshid Hussain. Who was he? This man here, known as Mad Ash, ringleader. What happened to him? Answer: with his brothers, jailed 35 years. And then we had this report. This is 8 years ago now. Quilliam group-based child sexual exploitation report, and they say dissecting the grooming gangs, 84% of child sexual exploitation offenders who operate in gangs or groups are Asian, and most of them are men of Pakistani Muslim origin. So this was years ago. It couldn't have been clearer. And yesterday's report by Baroness Casey found that data about the ethnicity of those responsible for the crimes wasn't recorded for 2/3 of perpetrators. Police were apparently discouraged from doing so for fear of raising tensions in local communities. The Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, gave a statement in the Commons yesterday. Have a listen.
The findings of her audit are damning. At its heart, she identifies a deep-rooted failure to treat children as children. A continued failure to protect children and teenage girls from rape, from exploitation and serious violence, and from the scars that last a lifetime. She finds too much fragmentation in the authorities' response, too little sharing of information, too much reliance on flawed data, too much denial, too little justice, too many criminals getting off, too many victims being let down.
So she confirmed they will have a national inquiry, but critics say it's too little, too late. What do you think, Tessa?
Wow, this is on so many levels. This plays in really deeply uncomfortable ways. The first thing is, this has been going on for years, and I'm with Baroness Louise Casey when last night on Newsnight, she actually scolded the political parties for politicising something. And I'm not exempting Keir Starmer for pushing this away in January, effectively, saying it was sort of right-wing bandwagonism. But I think the truth is there was a feeling that the Conservative Party and Reform really cared much more about the fact that the perpetrators of these revolting crimes tended to be predominantly of Pakistani Muslim origin. And that was what was getting them excited, not the vulnerability and abuse of legions of girls, many of whom, incidentally, came from care which was systematically underfunded under Conservative
administration. The reason
administration.
the ethnicity is so important...
It is important.
It is because it stopped the authorities' social workers getting stuck in because they thought we'll be seen as racist.
100%. I agree.
Okay, so that's why it's important.
That is, it was absolutely crucial. But Jeremy, you and I were not born yesterday, and this has excited the right-wing press and the right-wing parties.
But isn't that just irrelevant?
But yes and no, because actually the way in which it's still, yesterday in the House of Commons, this unedifying spectacle of a political football blaming game.
Okay,
actually,
so
the fact is the entire...
on that note, let's see Kemi Badenoch, Tory leader, being critical of the government. Have a listen.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the Right Honourable Lady for advance sight of this statement. Although I must say, I couldn't believe my ears, listening to the Home Secretary's statement as if this was their plan all along, when we all know it is another U-turn. After months of pressure, the Prime Minister has finally accepted our calls for a full statutory national inquiry into the grooming gangs.
I suppose the problem, Samuel, is these inquiries, and you've already hinted. In fact, Boris Johnson, who you worked for, said this absolutely openly. 7 years these things take.
Yeah.
And you get to it, and then they ignore all the findings. We've still got the Grenfell inquiry going on. Mm-hmm. We've still got the contaminated blood inquiry going on.
COVID pandemic.
The COVID inquiries. Sweden finished their inquiry during the actual pandemic.
Yeah.
We can't do inquiries.
Yeah, we're shocking. And
we're rubbish at them. Yeah. And they just make lawyers rich, and then we ignore the findings.
Yeah, or we find it difficult to implement.
So why doesn't somebody have the courage to just say, we're not doing an inquiry because inquiries are rubbish in this country?
Inquiries are rubbish. It doesn't mean that there isn't a place for national inquiries when they work and they're efficient. Unfortunately, we do a really crap job of doing that.
Have we ever had an inquiry that's done a good job?
No, but at the same time, I think this is an exceptional circumstance because of the nature of the cases. What I would also say is, it is quite ironic, why I would agree with you, it is quite ironic that folks on the right who, when I was in government, were not very keen on collecting ethnicity data on a myriad of subjects, are now very, very keen for that data to be found and
Tessa.
Yeah, and I would like to point out there's Kemi Badenoch, and by the way, Boris Johnson, he referred to no more spaffling money on child abuse investigations. That was the word he used. The first report on this came in 2013, Rochdale. The Conservatives had 10 years to sort this out and didn't. And I think that's why it annoys me when it's become tribal, because the fact is, whether it was under Labour or under the Conservatives, the state has consistently let down vulnerable women, consistently. And by the way, the issue of many of these girls being in care is relevant. Under the Conservatives, 20,000 more children in a less well-funded care sector. And yes, of course, ethnicity should be taken into account. But that baffles me.
We need to move on.